right. Good morning, and welcome to the Coaches Corner, brought to you by the Endurance Lab, where the coaches from the lab recap the week and answer your questions from the forum. Really quick, let me recap that. Hello and welcome to the Coaches Corner, brought to you by the Endurance Lab, where the coaches from the lab recap the week and answer your questions from the forum. My name's Jason Flores, one of the Endurance Lab coaches, and I'm joined by coaches Taya Friestead and Mitch Dingerman this morning. Good morning, guys. All right, let me get a quick layout fix here, and we can get started. Get that. And so just a reminder that we are live on several different platforms. So what you're seeing today is raw, unedited commentary from our coaches today. And that also gives you, the viewer, a chance to be part of the action. You can jump into the show, ask questions, and we'll bring it into the show live. So jump on and join us here on the Endurance Lab. So welcome, everybody. How's everybody doing?
Wonderful.
Excellent. I'm getting all our layout sorted out here, and I need to get this all flowed out. But what we'll do is while I get this showed out, I'd like to get this conversation started, and let's do our little round table here. We're actually going to spend some time to get to know one of our coaches, Mitch Dingerman. So I am going to throw it out for a couple questions to Coach Mitch, and so we can get to know him a little bit better. Taya, you want to throw that first question out while I get everything shared out?
Sure. So Mitch, tell us about sport that you played in college.
Yeah, so actually I was a high schooler in Kentucky. I was a pretty avid cyclist, and when I went to University of Michigan, actually I joined the cycling team my freshman year, which was great. But the issue was that all their training rides or their predominant ones were on Saturday morning, and I had a penchant for really enjoying myself on Friday night.
Couldn't you bounce back pretty quickly the next morning?
No, I really enjoyed myself on Friday nights. So
just go straight, right?
So yeah, so that didn't really last, and for other reasons, like I had really little requirement for physical activity, so I really didn't get involved in sport until really my late 30s when I needed to get back in shape. So I'm getting some feedback here.
Yeah, I am too. Let me see. But go ahead, Mitch. So you're saying so Saturday morning.
No. So I mean, I was not really an athlete until, and I don't even know if I consider myself an athlete today, but I was not really an athlete until my late 30s when I got back in shape.
Very nice.
All right, so
was there any of this? Yeah, so I guess follow up to that. So during that, it kind of reminds me of the times I would work eye clinic. For those who don't know, I'm an optometrist, and I was in optometry school. Saturday morning was the most exciting time to be in the clinic for all of us, whether you were family practice, medical doctor, because we get everybody crawling in from the bars at Saturday morning clinic. So pretty hilarious. Oh man. So okay. Oh yeah. So this is a good one. I'm a lover of food with Mitch here. So what's your favorite food? We'll start off the bike, kind of like your go-to type of food, and then of course we'll bring it to on the bike. What do you like to eat when you're on the bike?
Yeah. So I've got a real big weakness. I don't have a sweet tooth. Everyone in my house, I have a wife and 3 girls. They all have really big sweet tooths. I have what I call like a grease or a fat tooth. Like burgers, pizza, chips and salsa, all that kind of food is my biggest weakness, and that's why I had to get back into sport in my late 30s, is because it's really not good for you in large quantities. But on the bike, I've always been able to tolerate gels really well, and I've used gels a lot in running, and also in cycling. And I'm a big fan of the GU gels. The 2-time caffeine ones are some of my favorite ones.
So have you done the dump the GU into your coffee and then like stir it all up and then drink your coffee?
No, I haven't even thought of that one. That's interesting. I will say that like running in Michigan in the winter with gels is a unique challenge because they get so thick after like an hour in your pocket in 15-degree weather that it's really nasty eating them. But
I wouldn't be riding 15-degree weather then.
No, it's running. But
yeah,
you don't run either, so.
That's pretty iron gut for gels. But I know, triathletes, if Ian was here, Andrea too, I mean, you've got to get the fuel in, and it's about that. And that is a conversation, for the forum too, talk about kind of that in the future. So, all right, Taya, what do we got next?
Something we don't know about you, Mitch.
Yeah, so you've got another military guy here, just like Ian. I didn't make a career of it, but I spent 6 years as an officer in the U.S. Navy. Was assigned on a ship. It afforded me a lot of great opportunities. Was able to take my bike overseas when we went to Europe and Israel. Actually, I did a ride around the Sea of Galilee in Israel on a mountain bike, which was really cool. So it was a neat part of my life, but I did it for about 6 years.
Super
How about
interesting. Yeah.
how about your most embarrassing moment on the bike, or run or swim?
Yeah, so I'd
Oh,
actually, so years ago when I was young, I had one moment. It was only me where I ran into a curb and didn't clip out and just literally did this onto the side. But I'd actually say the most embarrassing was at camp last
yeah. Okay,
February.
okay. I make sure we didn't miss that one.
And the fact, yeah, and the fact that there's a video makes it even worse. But so we were going through Scottsdale, and there was construction, and a car tried to go by us on the left, and I was on Eric Denning's wheel, and at the last moment he moved to the left to avoid a road sign, construction sign, and I didn't pay attention and move fast enough, so I hit the brakes real hard, and I think I hit the sign, and I went over the handlebars. Somehow managed to bend a titanium derailleur hanger, and then also messed up my shoulder for the entire season. So, and the worst thing was it was dribbling the news out to my wife over a few days, and then the whole point of the camp and the way I structure it was I wasn't really spending any money, and she constantly reminds me how much my physical therapy cost me. So.
Oh man. Oh man. So you mentioned your family. So tell us a little about kind of your family and where you live.
Yeah, so I live in southeastern Michigan. Met my wife at University of Michigan. She grew up in Michigan. I was born here, but grew up in Kentucky, and we have 3 daughters. One's in college, one's in high school, and one's in elementary school. And probably the youngest, my middle one runs cross country. My youngest is a swimmer, and she'll be a runner too. And we'll see where it goes.
Is she hearing the recording? So yeah, he's gonna be a runner too.
No, my oldest, you'll see my oldest because I don't think she's up this early, but you'll see my oldest sometimes like jump in on my training workouts or rides and say hello and things, which is interesting. She gets a kick out of this. She likes to show dad's streaming videos to her friends.
Oh
Oh
yeah,
gosh.
I get that too. My kids, I sometimes I do carpooling and I hear the friends, they jump in the car and they say, "Is it true that you have a YouTube channel? That is so cool."
So
It's them unpacking toys, right?
yeah, unpacking toys. Oh my god. So Mitch, is it your youngest or your middle that my son likes to watch videos because they both like to climb up walls? Who's your American Ninja Warrior? Which one?
It's my youngest. It's
Ah,
my youngest.
there you go. Yeah.
She just has too much energy. We're happy she started swimming again this week on a local team. So I'm hoping that 3 days a week of swimming will tire her out.
Also, maybe we should tell our viewers and listeners this. Our kids, when we
Yeah.
communicate over the weekend and stuff, we send videos of our kids challenging our
Each
our other
other.
coaches' kids. Okay, I'm climbing up, the wall over here. So this is your challenge,
Yeah.
Taya's daughter or whatever. And so
It's
they
fun.
keep sending videos back and forth. It's funny.
It is. It is fun. So excellent. So that kind of wraps up our chance to get to meet Coach Mitch. Thanks for being a good sport today, and we'll get a chance to meet our other coaches here as the time goes on. All right. So let's throw it over. We're actually gonna throw it over to Taya here. She's got a couple topics, just hot topics and things that came across in the lab in the forum. And if any questions for those that have joined in watching here on Facebook Live, definitely drop in some questions. Good morning to Kwan and Andy, who just joined in now. So, Taya, take it away.
So we're going to talk a little bit about calling it at a race or event. So when athletes decide that they're going to pull out of the race or an event that they're in. And the focus of the conversation here will be when that happens for reasons other than injury or safety. Okay, so it's not in the case where, for example, you're out and it's so dangerous that you can't see the road, or it's raining too much, or it's so foggy no one can see you, or it's so cold that you're starting to get hypothermia or whatever it is. We're referring to an event that you are in, the conditions are fine, or maybe, maybe it's a little windy or whatever, but and the athlete decides to pull out. And there was there were a couple of cases actually in the last weekend of people that I know. They went to a long event, 200 miles, and a lot of them didn't finish. They decided they didn't want to continue for one reason or another. So perhaps exploring some of the reasons why athletes would decide to pull out of an event. I guess one of them might be, and this is, we can get, there's a whole, and we can bring in perhaps Nate Last at some point here on our podcast to talk about mental skills and mental grit for athletes. But could it be, for example, fear? And the fear there could be related to perhaps failure. Let's say that you're in an event, you're a couple of hours in, and it's a long event, and you see that you're not progressing as you wish you were, and you're maybe not going fast enough. And you stop at a rest stop, and you might say to yourself, this is really hard. The conditions are hard because it's so windy. I'm tired, and you decide not to continue. So that might be one reason. The other reason, maybe you had in your mind that you were going to do well in this event, top 5, let's say. And then all of a sudden, you see that you're not going to anymore. And perhaps you have a history of really doing well in events. And in this one, you're not going to do so well, so you pull out before you get the better result. I think I've seen that too. Or you get dropped from your group, and all of a sudden, I'm not sure I want to continue with this. So there's definitely a conversation that goes on in an athlete's mind to come up to that decision. I think the examples that I gave in terms of toughness, if you're well prepared for an event, you train for it, and you show up and it doesn't go as planned, and let me tell you, most of the time it doesn't go as planned, would you give up? What are your thoughts, J-Flo and Mitch?
Yeah, I think it's really a personal decision. I mean, I've been in an event, and I know this isn't what you're talking about, but where I actually had like a nagging injury, and it wasn't going to cause me any long-term harm, but I just was miserable. I mean, and I was in pain, and like, one of your points, but I kept going because I didn't want to. For me, there's a message I don't want to send my kids. And last year I did a gravel grinder race, and I showed up. I hadn't even registered yet, and it was raining, and it was going to be absolutely miserable. But I still registered. I'd done the training, and I did the race because it's a message that I want to send my kids that sometimes things are really tough, and you just have to do it. But I think it's a very personal decision, and I'm not going to fault somebody for making that call, but it's just something that I've never felt comfortable just because I'm not going to get the result I want, or it's not going to be enjoyable. It's something I won't do.
Yeah, I definitely agree on that point. Even on those, darkest, things just not going for you. You've kind of built yourself, us up as athletes. We put ourselves together for, this event, this ride, this group event that you put time aside to do. By no means any of us are pro athletes. And so when we do find ourselves kind of in this moment and you've put time aside to make this happen for you, you really want to make the best of it. And sometimes, you may not be with that front group for that group ride. You may get dropped off the back, but you've got to find that group that you can ride with. And, kind of in the virtual sense, let's say, you go out on, a social ride and the pace is just far too high. Everybody's 3.0 happens to be everybody's 4.0. And, you just need to find that group that will work with you and that'll work for you, and find what could you get out of that race. And then for this situation where, you're in a moment where you thought you'd do really well and you would excel in that sort of race or platform, being okay with, being in that moment and experiencing and just being thankful that, hey, I've got a chance to do this sort of thing. And, really in races and in big races, there's one winner. So really you got to find, and we always push to our athletes, is to find your goal and to voice those and be true to yourself with those, so that when you have a result or something happens, it's not always what they call, I want to say, what is it? Result focused. That it could be just something that you wanted to do, or some skill that you wanted to get better at.
And the other thing I would say too, from my experience in being on the bike for long, long days, and we're talking 10 plus hours, you will not feel great the whole time. You will have moments that you're going to feel like crap. You're going to have moments that you're going to ask yourself, why am I doing this? This sucks. But that happens to everyone. You acknowledge that, but then don't stay there in that funk, right? Just move on. Move on. It will pass. So give it a chance, because you might be having all those negative thoughts at that moment, and then that will pass. The other thing that go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, it reminds me of a story before we change gears here. There is a rider. It's actually a Zwifter and a coach. His name's Pav Bryan. He's from a Direct Power Coaching, and he's actually did the Route 66 route from California, Santa Monica Pier, all the way to Chicago. And
wow,
he was just completely fueled by his live videos and people supporting him online and really just kind of pushing him. I think his goal was something like 11 days, something like 200 to 250 miles a day to get to Chicago. And unfortunately, I didn't follow the very end of it, like days like 9 through 11. I know he was going through some pain, but he was reaching out to the community to get that support. And really his drive to do it was, one, he was raising awareness, of course, and a social awareness to get that community involved and behind him. So again, it's just talking about, that days you just didn't want to ride anymore and wanted to pull the plug, but you're doing it for this larger, bigger reason. And those are the things that we can look for, whether it be, raising money for something or trying to prove something, or to be an example for our kids, or that sort of thing.
Yeah. And one topic that I will then close this particular topic here, and perhaps a hook for next podcast, is being dehydrated or not fueling enough, starting to bonk, will give you negative thoughts.
Oh yeah,
mental. So believe it or not, there's a connection between not being fueled properly and having those negative thoughts of, this sucks, I'm irritated, I want to give up. So that's something also to keep in mind.
Yeah. We've got two comments here from the live stream. We got Sean talking about the Scenic Shore 150 from Wisconsin to Sturgeon Bay. So it's Macomb to Sturgeon Bay. It's 150 miles, 2 days. So tempted to pull out. It was 30-mile-per-hour winds on day one, and he was like cursing and angry at the wind, but ended up pushing. And day two was half as windy, and he was able to get through that first day and experience this gorgeous ride. Just really great weather on the second day. So the second day ended up all being worth it, pushing through. And our second comment from Troy, that he thinks it's really important to finish for your mind, whatever it is, whatever goal you have, because it's so easy to pull out. It just makes it easier and easier every time you have an event to just pull out earlier, or maybe not even show up, or that sort of thing. So it's really tough mentally. You kind of get down that road.
Thanks for those comments, guys.
Yeah. All right. What else do we have there, Tara?
Yeah, so that's it for this topic. You want to switch gears to?
Yeah, why don't we jump over? Why don't we jump over? I know Mitch has got a time crunch here, so let's jump over to Mitch's comment. Something that we've kind of touched on, and as coaches, we've experienced a little bit of experience with riders kind of experimenting with this sort of thing, but you see it more and more. And we get questions. And so what I wanted to do is at least bring more kind of a big umbrella look at this. And what we're talking about is CBD. He's going to give us a little bit of information about that, and hopefully it'll answer some of our general questions and hopefully spark some conversation that we can bring it back. So what do we got, Mitch?
Yeah, so I mean, you can't really turn on the news without hearing something about CBD oil these days. It's kind of like on the top of all the nutrition and drug and even getting into the endurance and athletes world is CBD. So CBD is actually cannabinoid oil. So it's a compound that's found in the cannabis plants, the marijuana plants, or hemp plants. And apparently there's all kinds of different cannabinoids within the plant, which includes CBD, which is what we're talking about here, but then also THC, which is, people who use the drug recreationally, that's what they care about. But CBD is shorthand for cannabinoid oil. I can't even say it, it's so hard. But so anecdotally, or what everyone is really saying about CBD is that they use it to relieve pain, anxiety, and a range of disorders. And in fact, even last month, the FDA approved a drug called Epidiolex, which is a CBD-based drug to treat 2 forms of epilepsy. So there's some science going on if the FDA is approving it. So if we actually get back into the mechanism behind this, so in your nervous system, you've got this system, it's called the endocannabinoid system, which is part of your neurotransmitter system and allows your nerves to communicate and work together. And what CBD does is it kind of allows you to elevate the endocannabinoids so that you can have like a better wellness feeling, or you're relaxed, sort of a good feeling, but it also has some other effects. But the question is, does it do anything for us as athletes? People anecdotally are saying, look, it reduces inflammation, it reduces pain, it allows you to relax and really focus on your training. But there is no hard science yet to date. There are no clinical trials with athletes to date which relate around CBD. So I think for us as coaches, I think it's something that we watch and we continue to look into and see where the science goes. But I don't think any of us feel comfortable recommending this until there's actually more hard science around it. I think there's probably a lot of natural alternatives that we could talk to with Andrea in the future on our podcast that could actually help you with anti-inflammatory or maybe help with reducing anxiety. But right now, I think as a coach, I wouldn't be recommending my athletes to go all in on CBD oil because I don't think there's any hard science on it. What are your thoughts, Jason?
Yeah, I definitely, I think that it is a new and emerging area. And being here in California, I come across, obviously, you know, there's a lot of legalization in different areas, and it's a little bit different as far as like laws are concerned. But I do come across our athletes here that are using it and have seen really good results. So anecdotally, of course, is essentially, you know, there's no science, there's not really strong science yet that's telling us, but it's all very new. So this is something that when I see being used, I'm seeing really good results with recovery. I'm seeing their ability to, you know, get to the three, you know, their 3 intense workouts and being able to do back-to-backs, being able to do, you know, 2-a-days, things like that. These aren't riders that are, you know, suffering from any, you know, lack of being able to recover, but they like the ability to not have that feeling of not being able to go out again or to do more work. And, you know,
how are they using it? Is it an ointment? Is it a supplement?
Yeah. So there's faster ways. So there's a couple different ways, and I did spend some time at the Fit Expo here in Los Angeles recently, and I talked to a couple makers of it. And so there's a couple ways. There is a lotion that that you can use. It's just through the epidermis. So those are for kind of like local aches and pains. The next level would be through just they also have it in foods. So this particular vendor had it like in a beef jerky that you could have like as a post-recovery type thing. But the most potent way is going to be through 2 ways, which is a pill or a tincture that you could put under your tongue. And the reason why under your tongue is because it has so many receptors and you're able to absorb it that much quicker. But the most common form that I see athletes is through a pill form. And so it's a very metered dose. So the minimal doses, from what I understand, is given, and I believe I might be off by a decimal, but I believe it's 100 milligrams, and that's kind of like the therapeutic dose, and that's what riders that I know that are using.
It's going to be definitely interesting to follow, especially as more states legalize right now. So the state of Michigan, I think it's on the ballot in November for general marijuana legalization, and so the state has decided that CBD falls in that category, so it's not legal in the state, so you can't even think about it here. I don't know if Illinois has anything on the ballot, but I think also, I mean, across the border for me, you know, Windsor in Canada just legalized it for the whole country. So it's a crazy world we're living in, and it's going to be interesting to watch the science. I mean, especially when you look at some of the other benefits. Like I know people who have issues with anxiety, and there's a lot of talk around the fact that maybe it's a more natural kind of drug to help treat anxiety. So it's definitely really interesting. It's just you'd want to see some studies done and make sure it's doesn't have any side effects. You know, like some of the same articles I read talked about, like, and this is more looking at, there's a lot of like ultra runners and things who really use marijuana and actually THC. And there's some science that says it actually reduces your endurance. So it's interesting to watch everything evolve and see where it comes out for athletes.
I did want to mention for those riders who are, riding in races where, I was gonna say Zada, but I meant to mean, USA. It would be WADA. And so, anyways, if you're doing like USA Cycling events or ones that are doing any drug testing, that sort of thing, it actually is in the books as in the CBD form in the
Right.
properly extracted. It's actually a legal drug that you can take, under those regulations. So look into it. But always with any of these supplements, always look into the source. Where is it coming from? Is it being contaminated with anything else? That's really, really key. So you got to get a clean source. Because if you are getting pulled and you are getting tested, that to make sure that there's nothing else that's not on the list that you're not supposed to take. Any comments there, Teo?
No, I want to actually use that as a segue into the recovery part, because we're
Sounds
talking
good.
about the reducing inflammation, etc.
Mhm.
And we talked about recovery before, and we had podcasts where we went quite deep into the subject. But what I want to bring in today is a specific aspect of recovery, which is, should you just put your legs up and rest that way? But the segue with the inflammation is, it is pretty well known at this point that inflammation is part of the recovery and adaptation process. So you work hard, you break your muscles down, and the way for your body to recover, and when I'm talking about recovery and adaptation, I'm not talking about feeling better, right? Having the pain go away. I'm talking about making your muscles stronger so that you're adapting to the workouts and getting stronger and stronger as you continue to train. And for that to happen, the inflammation needs to happen and your body needs to be working with that inflammation. That is why taking anti-inflammatories is not a good recommendation for recovery and adaptation. So taking that Advil, taking the over-the-counter anti-inflammatory drugs, I don't know what the CBG that we just talked about would do. But keeping in mind that your body has its natural process for recovery and adaptation. And so with that, I've been noticing as well that, for example, in my case, sometimes I'll go do a very, very hard workout in the morning, early in the morning, let's say 5, 6 in the morning, and I feel completely trashed afterwards. Not from a nutritional standpoint. Let's say nutrition is on point and all of that is on point. So the tendency is to just want to sit down and do absolutely nothing for the rest of the day. But is that a good idea? Is that the best way for your body to recover? Well, one thing that most people might not know is, again, the body has its own process of recovering itself, but what makes it possible for the body to recover is having those fluids and nutrients flowing through your bloodstream. And if you just sit down and don't do anything, then you might not be getting that quicker recovery from the body, the blood flow. And how do you get the blood flow? Well, one way is walking. So if you had a hard session and you feel like just sitting for the rest of the day, don't. Move around and get walking. So, hey, doggy. I can concentrate with the doggy. I get too distracted. I love dogs. So, so think about it this way. The one great. So the more the research evolves in terms of recovery, the more the research points in the way of helping the body's natural way of recovering. And the one thing that the body does well is that will help the body is compression. And the
Right.
compression is either from compression socks or the boots. And boots are even better, but not everybody can afford the boots. But what the boots do, they help with, let's think about your heart pumping blood into your limbs, right? Then you need to have the blood come back to your core. And your body does that naturally. And that's why walking is good, because your calves, for example, work as a mini pump that will
Hmm.
help the blood come from the legs back into the core and you get the fluids flowing. But you can get that with the boots. and you can get that
Right.
with compression. So those are good ways of recovering. So again, when you think about a active recovery versus laying down doing nothing recovery, walking is great,
Yeah.
and you might feel better by doing that. The next day type thing, you don't need to be on the bike. A lot of people talk about spinning it easy as an active recovery. You
Yeah.
can do that. You don't need to do that. Walking will just be as good, or doing the compression will be as good. Um, yeah. So
Yeah.
Hey,
So go ahead, Mitch. Go ahead.
hey, can I real quick, and this is just, you touched on it for a second on the anti-inflammatory drugs. Can I also add in that for our runners, because I did this to myself, is so one thing a lot of people don't understand about anti-inflammatory drugs is that they inhibit the prostaglandins that your body produces to help with bone repair. And when you run, you get a bunch of tiny micro fractures in your bones. And if you're taking anti-inflammatories religiously to deal with the pain and the aches and whatever you get from running, you can end up really hurting yourself because you can get stress fractures.
Yeah.
So the two don't go together. So I used to be a big guy around like ibuprofen after lots of workouts to feel better and to sleep and to reduce inflammation, and just avoid them. Just like Tay was saying, they don't, the anti-inflammatory doesn't help with the recovery. Find other ways to deal with the pain, and just avoid those drugs because they're not good for you long term.
Absolutely. And just a little bit of physiology behind it all. So our body does have an active pump, essentially our heart, to pump the blood to our organs, but there isn't actually an active pump to pump it back. So the way it gets pumped back is us moving our body, or us having compression, or us elevating things so that it goes the other way. So,
right.
but can we put our feet up enough up against the wall and sit there and do nothing and get the blood where it needs to go, or can you actively compress? And essentially, the boots that Taya's talking about is essentially does that, and then it kind of flashback a picture of maybe we should have a podcast where Taya can sit there in her boots and she could try to do the podcast the same time. But essentially they're boots that you put on almost like pants, and they essentially will compress from your ankle all the way up to your above your up to your thigh, and repeat that motion to kind of really push that up. But simply a little bit of compression and movement of the muscles is what your body naturally does to bring that back, to bring that blood back, to bring those things, those inflammatory markers away, and to bring fresh blood into the body. There is a comment here live from Sean that if he rides in the morning at 6 to 8 a.m. and he goes to work at 9, Taya, and he ends up sitting all day because he's at a call center. What are the things that they can do? Get up and stretch. What kind of intervals? What do you think that we've seen that could help them?
Definitely walk, stand up and walk every, let's say, hour or so. Just go get some water. And in fact, you can drink a lot of water. That way, you're going to have to go to the bathroom anyway. And so you're doing it right. It's twice the benefit. You kill two birds with one stone. You're getting your fluids in, and you're walking around. And I did that for many, many, many years. Working in an office behind a desk for 10, 12 hours, and it's easy to just get stuck there. And if you're in a call center, that you might not be able to take as many breaks, but even if you cannot take the break and leave your desk, stand up and move around. So not just standing up, because if you're standing up and not moving, that's not doing anything. In fact, that's, again, the blood is not, it's pulling there and it's not helping. So move about, even if you have to pace back and forth in your own working area there.
Yeah, definitely. Mitch, are you headed off?
Yeah, I apologize, guys. I've got to get going for my day job, and we'll see you guys next week.
Thanks, Mitch. Yeah, so
Sure.
just to continue on what Taya was saying, kind of getting up and moving and recovery, because a lot of us do this exact same thing. We are, working out hard in the morning, and we have our day job, whether it be sitting through the day, or whether it be doing that, or if it's us having to, move all around all day, or sit in a car, even, long commutes, things like that. So what's important is to make sure that we are getting that movement in, whether it's standing workstations or that sort of thing, those could be really, really useful as well. So just kind of consider those opportunities to be able to move and do that sort of thing. But yeah, recovery is something that is very individual, but you need to kind of get some of those things right. And a lot of those things are just making sure that you're getting movement in throughout the day to get that blood flowing and get that blood moving. So Taya, you are a normal, like a boot user daily, weekly? What's kind of your routine?
Daily, of course. Even on rest days, even on days that I don't work out, I get in the boots for at least half an hour. And luckily, I work from home, so I can have my laptop with me, and I can sit in the boots for long periods of time.
All right. Quick question here from Ryan Adam de Guzman. How about like when you're resting, what kind of meals or drinks? We've covered a little bit about this, but just kind of a recap. During this time is recovery. Maybe not so much. Let's get ourselves outside of the post-workout window, but just kind of all the rest of the day. Is there anything specifically he's asking? Should he keep it light, or to make a faster recovery, or just kind of go back to his normal kind of eating habits?
So let's say that you're in a regular training week, but because it's also dependent upon what are you doing. If it's a week of really, really hard work, day after day after day, and perhaps just one rest day, then you might be needing to fuel more. If it's a recovery week, you don't need so much food. But in terms of, I think the ideal is making sure you're getting the right nutrients in.
Right.
And protein is definitely important for recovery. And so you want to make sure that you get enough protein. Athletes, if they're training consistently, they need at least 120 grams of protein a day. And so keeping that in mind, the carbs, of course, also part of recovery. There's a whole topic of carbohydrates and timing of taking carbs around the time that you're working out, or if you have to recover for the next session the next day. If your next session is 12 hours from now, or 24 hours from now, or 2 days from now, that also depends on when you take your carbs in. But really having balanced meals with protein, and always get the vegetables in there, just because you need all of those nutrients. It's part of a well-functioning body.
So the difference being, in that post-workout window, making sure you are fueling for that workout, but really kind of the big picture in the rest of the day is plenty of vegetables. Andrea will always remind us, making sure you get vegetables in, colorful vegetables. I know she always reminds us as well.
The rainbow.
That's right, the rainbow of vegetables. Making sure you're getting those in, because so often we get focused on proteins and carbohydrates that we sometimes forget that the carbohydrate source could be from sweet potatoes, green vegetables, broccoli, cauliflower. These are all also sources of carbohydrates that you can also get in. So getting those vegetables in and the carbohydrates in that way could also be useful. So there's no need to really go light on the food, because you actually need fuel for the body. But again, we have always talked about, and we can go back and we can in the show notes maybe post a couple of the episodes that we've talked about, specifically post-workout routines specifically, and fueling for the workouts and getting that fuel for what you're doing, whether it's a hard workout or an endurance workout. It can be different in that respect, but really great question. All right, so looks like we've got our topics, our hot topics all sorted out here. We do have a couple topics for what's coming up with this week in the lab, and we've got our 3 core workouts from this week, Taya. So can we talk a little bit about that for our lab riders in the endurance lab?
Yeah, so what we did this week, we worked on strength steps workout. This was focusing on developing strength via low cadence efforts. We always work on different cadences in our workouts in the lab. We do a lot of high cadence work. We do single-legged drills, and low cadence is also part of it, focusing on climbing, but also in strength there. So great workout, alternating all of those. And then we also did race accelerations, which is a simulation of a race, like race type efforts. Those were short intervals, but very powerful, starting with VO2 efforts, holding threshold, and then with the sprint at the end. And then we closed the week with Endurance Lab Peaks 5, which is taking the rider through a ramping up effort, starting in the high tempo range and finishing out with a sprint. So again, similar to a wind up for a sprint finish or preem in a criterium, designed to teach the rider's body how to push into the next higher level on demand.
Yeah, and so for those listeners that are just tuning in, and this is these workout descriptions are new for you, these are the workouts that we prescribe to our athletes in the Endurance Lab, and as you notice, they tie in a lot of different other skills. So it's not all about hitting, this sweet spot intensity right at threshold for, whether it be 10, 15, 20 minutes at a time. You're listening to cues about cadence, about understanding pacing. And so what we really try to involve when you do your workouts is not only hitting wattages, but to learning skills that can transfer out, whether you're racing indoors or going outdoors. You're able to use those skills to your advantage, and really be able to use kind of everything, all the tools in the toolbox, versus just be able to put watts down. Because like we like to say at the end of the race, at the end of the race, they don't check your watts per kilogram to see if you're the winner. So
that's right. Going fast is about much more than just watts, right?
That's right. That's right.
So much more. So we work on all of those skills in the lab. Yeah.
That's right. All right. So we could talk a little bit about on the horizon. For those lab riders, we are in week 7 and coming up on our last week 8, which is our roundup. But what that means for you listeners, as if you're looking to jump in, we can tell you a little bit about the next lab we'll be holding. And I'll pass it over to Taya to tell us a little bit about what's coming up after week 8, a quick rest week, and then what do we got?
Yeah. So after this lab, and by the way, we have labs starting and ending every 8 weeks, but if you don't have to join us just at the beginning or at the end of a lab. You can jump in at any time. We have those available for you, so you can check out the website. But this phase right now is going to be about maintenance and using the ability that you have built up until this point to continue on to carry you through the rest of the season, whether you're going to be, let's say, doing some more racing, or if you're going to just go out and enjoy the weather as much as you can. If you're somewhere where it's fall right now, and enjoy the weather as much as you can with the events that you want to do. So that's coming up pretty shortly. We're going to have more information for you available soon.
Absolutely. So it's a great time to be able to again use this plan to kind of keep your skills sharp for the rest of the season, for those that will still have good weather towards the end of the year here. But Taya does bring a good point for listeners that are new for us or that have been in the lab before. We will be offering what we call evergreen labs, which are labs that you could start at any time and you can get slotted in. So definitely look out for that. So check out endurancelab.fit for that. In the future, if you want to know more information, ask questions. We do have a forum that we use, and you can access the forum. There's a public side of it as well as a member side of it. So there's a lot of great information on both sides. So definitely check that out at endurancelab.fit. Anything else going on for us today, Taya?
Yeah, so we have a listener challenge of the week. So last week, our challenge for you was to do some standing outside, because we trained that quite a bit inside, and see how that translates into your speed, and have that conversation going in the forum. For this coming week, the challenge for you will be to ride in the drops more. So whether you are in a group ride or whether you are, by yourself in the wind, change your position so you're riding in the drops more. And see what that does for you. See if you need to change cadence when you're doing that. See if a lower cadence will help you go faster. And see how your body adapts to that. So riding in the drops is the challenge for you this week.
I like it. We're going to a lot of sore back. I have a feeling we'll have a lot of sore backs next week.
Not if they're doing the core
exactly.
15-minute
You're right. Though. You're right.
Then the back is ready. Yeah.
You're right. And just to share a story, luckily I'm able to get out a little bit more to do some riding outdoors, and I was able to do a couple of the intervals this week standing, and it was definitely a challenge. And I think the challenge comes from being able to meter your output. So for example, if an interval is asking for something kind of in the middle, let's say it's tempo or just below or above threshold, and being able to not have this huge surge as you stand up, because a lot of times when you see people stand up, there's this huge surge into like 300, 400, 500 watts, and then it settles down. But in fact, what you want to do, if it's in fact what we're trying to do, is to harness, let's say if you're doing 250 watts, you stand up and it stays pretty close to that same 250 watts. Because if you want to get that, the reason why you stand up is to change the muscles that you're using, to give some rest to those muscles that you're using to climb, for example. You need to make sure that we're staying right at that level. And again, it's one of the skills that we train in the endurance lab, but in my experience, it's something that everybody can work on. So being able to stand up, still put 250 watts down, sit down and be able to put 250 watts down, then you're kind of making this nice little transition. And it takes some finesse. You need to get some gears figured out, but yeah, that's totally right. Yeah,
the control, the gears, the cadence, and the speed that you can gather when you're outside, which you don't always feel, right? You don't feel when you're inside practicing the same skills.
Absolutely, yeah. It's definitely, that is one of the things that's different indoors versus outdoors. All right, so it looks like we've got everything there. Any last comments here for our listeners, Taya?
No, I think we covered everything. As always, we're available in the forum. So hit us there with any questions and comments. We're going to also post this podcast in there for additional comments that people might have.
Absolutely, absolutely. So again, thank you for joining us today in the Coach's Corner. If it's your first time listening and would like to hear more content from the Endurance Lab, head over to your favorite podcast app and search the Endurance Lab, or head to YouTube, search the same, and don't forget, click subscribe. For more information on when our next lab is, which is exactly about 2 weeks from now, head over to endurancelab.fit to learn where you can join us to train smart and get results. See everybody next week.